Coming up on Arirang News, the Moon administration looks to save South Korea's economy from the factors abroad that are dragging on exports. The president says plans are in the works to boost domestic spending and tourism. As Japan prepares to put even more restrictions on its trade with Korea, experts warn that those measures are threatening the global supply chain and global economic growth. And with North Korea holding off from talks on its nuclear program, South Korea and the U.S. consider renaming one of their joint military drills as a way to bring the North back to the table. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. It had been expected that North Korea and the U.S. would hold working-level talks on denuclearization within a few weeks of the Kim-Trump meeting at the DMZ, but those talks have yet to happen. The North is not responding. It's taken issue with the joint military drills Seoul and Washington are scheduled to hold next month. And in response, the allies are considering changing the exercise's name. Oh Jung-hee reports.
Anticipations were high that the historic meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump would lead to a breakthrough in the months-long stalled denuclearization talks. After the DMZ meeting, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had forecast working-level talks would take place within 3 weeks.
We'll have to get this month, starting tomorrow. So sometime in July, probably the next 2 or 3 weeks, probably around the middle of the month, would be my guess. And a place yet to be determined. But the teams will gather, they'll start working, they'll start exchanging ideas.
But the talks have yet to take place. The U.S. has suggested to the North that they hold working-level meetings, but the North has not responded. Instead, it rather came back with thorny criticisms against a South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise, warning that if 19-2 Dongmeng happens, it would affect the Pyongyang-Washington nuclear talks. Seoul and Washington are reportedly considering changing the name of their joint drills.
South Korea and the U.S. will decide on the name and dates of the combined exercise through consultations. Both military authorities are preparing for an exercise later this year to prove capabilities for the OPCON transfer.
Seoul's Unification Minister Kim Yeon-chul explained in a radio interview last week that it seems it's taking time to prepare for the working-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. The Presidential Secretary for Peace Planning, Choi Jong-gun, said Saturday at a forum in the U.S. that the joint exercise will go ahead as planned in August and that it's not an offensive drill. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
In Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's coalition are celebrating a half-win in Sunday's elections for the upper house. They grew their majority, but did not get the supermajority needed to propose a revision to Japan's pacifist constitution. If Abe wants to achieve that long-held goal of his, he'll need to win over other parties, and that might not be easy. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's ruling Liberal Democratic Party and his allied political forces won a strong majority in Sunday's upper house election, but fell short of a two-thirds supermajority required to push ahead with amending the Japan's post-war pacifist constitution. With a total of 124 seats up for grabs, the pro-amendment camp needed to win at least 85 seats to get a two-thirds majority in the House of Councilors. According to local newspaper Asahi Shimbun, the pro-revision parties claimed 81 seats. Despite his long-held hope of constitutional reform slipping through his fingers, Abe pointed to voters siding with political stability.
Stability or chaos, this is what I have been appealing to the public about. The results show that the public made a judgment for us to make advancements on policies under a stable political base and to proceed on diplomacy to protect the state's interests. I want to meet these expectations.
Having pledged to stipulate the role of the self-defense forces in the constitution, Abe has set his sights on doing so in a revised constitution in 2020. But with the pro-amendment camp failing to secure the two-thirds majority, Abe faces a tough task of convincing opposition parties if he wants to ensure Japan's self-defense forces in the constitution. Japan's current constitution does not allow the country to develop its military or wage war. Taking office in December 2012, Abe is on course to become Japan's longest-serving prime minister if he stays in position until November. According to Japanese broadcaster NHK, the voter turnout for Sunday's election was estimated at below 50%, a low not seen an upper house poll since 1995. Kang-yong-woo, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Abe has urged South Korea to come to the table and discuss the court rulings in Korea that ostensibly prompted Japan's trade restrictions. These are the court rulings ordering Japanese firms to compensate the Koreans they forced to work for them during World War II. Speaking Sunday on Asahi TV, Abe said constructive discussions can only happen when Seoul engages on the issue. He also claimed Seoul is breaking the spirit of an agreement signed by the two sides in December 2015 to promote cooperation. And on the trade issue, he claimed Seoul has brushed off Tokyo's requests to discuss it, but South Korea insists that Japan has refused its requests. A container ship flying a South Korean flag was attacked early Monday morning by pirates near the Singapore Strait. The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries says the crew of the CK Bluebell, which was on its way to Incheon from Brazil, were beaten and robbed at 4:25 a.m., some 100 miles away from the entrance to the strait. It's not clear where the pirates were from. The container ship had 22 crew members on board and was boarded by 7 pirates from a speedboat. They threatened the crew with guns before taking off with over $13,000 in cash and the crew's possessions, including shoes and clothing. The ministry said 2 crew members suffered bruising, but there were no serious injuries. At the 2019 World Aquatics Championships in Gwangju, South Korean swimmer Kim Seo-yeong will compete in the final of the women's 200-meter individual medley. Kim is seen as the country's best hope for a medal in swimming, having finished 7th in the semifinals to claim a berth in the final. She's also made the final in that event at the World Championships 2 years ago, the first Korean to do so. She finished 6th then and will be hoping to go at least one better. The final starts at around 8 p.m. Korea time. Now, when the summer heat starts to kick in around this time of year, it's not only tough on people in South Korea, but on animals too. At the Seoul Zoo, though, special care is taken to ensure that the animals stay as cool as possible. Won Jung-hwan reports.
Animals can't turn on the air conditioning or buy themselves a cold drink, so they can have a hard time with the scorching heat. Luckily, the Seoul Zoo is constantly coming up with new ideas to make sure its animals can stay healthy and safe. One thing it does is give them cool treats.
It's been really hot lately, and that's not easy on our animals, where zoo staff have come up with different ways to help the animals get through the summer according to their unique characteristics.
For the Asian elephant, the zookeepers prepared massive blocks of ice with various kinds of fruit inside. The elephants love to get sprayed with cool water, but this time, the ice-cold fruit comes first. This 3-year-old called Himangi is also loving the special treatment, trying to smash open his watermelon just like his parents do. The treats are different from each species. Some get frozen fruit, but others just want to have fun in the pool. For the hyenas, the zookeeper's idea worked perfectly.
Hyenas like to get in the water, so we tried to find a way that would make it more fun for them. The bath bombs we used are non-toxic and smell like fruit, so it makes them want to jump in.
And these little animals, ring-tailed lemur, are busy to munching up their sliced fruit. And when fruit is out of reach, their elastic arms and legs come in handy, or they'll just hang upside down and pull up the string. The zoo is also home to some animals that are quite sensitive to heat and are often unwilling to leave their shaded cages. Here too, one thing is sure to work. When the animals are tired from the scorching heat, there's only one way to get them to leave their cages, by seducing them with their favorite food coated with ice. Bears often get fresh fruit and frozen meat to cool them down, making sure they're healthy all summer. The zoo is located in heart of Seoul Grand Park in Gwacheon City, and it's home to more than 2,000 animals. Visitors will be glad to know that even in the extreme heat, each of the animals is taken good care of. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in says his government is working on measures both short-term and more fundamentally to see the economy through the slowdown in global growth and the trade restrictions by Japan that are hampering it further. Here's the president today at a weekly meeting with his top aides.
정부는 외교적 해결 노력과 함께 단기적 대책과 근본적 대책을 면밀히 준비하고 있습니다. 성장 동력에서 수출 부진을 만회할 수 있는 길은 국내 소비와 관광을 활성화하는 것입니다.
The president also said that in order for the Korean economy to go to the next level globally, it needs to boost its competitiveness in the industrial sector by highlighting its dynamism. Moon highlighted the importance of the system of cooperation between the government and industry in giving Korea a stronger edge in the material parts sector. South Korea continues trying to get the international community to press Japan to withdraw its restrictions on exports to the country. A key part of those efforts is coming up this week when the WTO General Council takes up the issue in Geneva. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Citing issues over South Korea's export controls, Japan announced this month that it was curbing exports of high-tech materials to South Korea for the production of semiconductor and display panels. Tokyo also revealed plans to remove Seoul from a whitelist of 27 countries that receive preferential trade treatment with Japan, calling it nothing more than economic retaliation for a separate historical issue. Seoul is pressuring the international community to press Tokyo to withdraw its export restrictions when the WTO's General Council holds a meeting on the two countries' trade dispute on Tuesday and Wednesday at Seoul's request. While the General Council is the WTO's highest decision-making body in Geneva, it's not the body to settle trade disputes. However, Seoul is looking to inform other members of Tokyo's unfair measures before taking the issue to the WTO's dispute settlement body. In its complaint, Seoul is likely to refer to articles of the WTO's General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Article 1 of the agreement states that a country must offer the same terms to the whole world and not just one country, while Article 11 prohibits quantitative restrictions on the import or export of any products among member nations. Leading the delegations at the WTO are South Korea's ambassador to Geneva, Baek Ji-ah, and Shingo Yamagami, the Director General of Tokyo's Foreign Ministry's Economic Affairs Bureau. Along with the WTO meeting, South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy plans to deliver an opinion to the Japanese government this week to press it to withdraw its export curbs. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea is sending a senior trade official to argue its case at that WTO meeting. Seoul's Trade Ministry said Monday that its Deputy Minister for International Trade and Legal Affairs, Kim Seo-yeong, will fully explain the South Korean government's position. Kim is an expert on international trade. His counterpart will be Shingo Yamagami, Director General of the Economic Affairs Bureau at Japan's Foreign Ministry. Japan is expected to remove South Korea from its so-called white list of trading partners subject to minimum restrictions. That means tougher restrictions ahead on more than 1,100 items compared to just 3 right now. Experts say this is a threat to not only South Korea's exports but also the growth of the global economy. Kim Da-mi explains.
South Korea's bread-and-butter semiconductor exports will be the first domino to fall, and it could be followed by many others if Japan widens its export curbs. Future growth in the country's semiconductor industry will be seriously compromised as key components and materials needed for research and development can no longer be sourced from Japan. The next target is the country's hydrogen vehicle sector, which Korea sees as an important source of future growth. Japan has in fact already warned that it could include machine tools and carbon fiber in its restriction list, which are critical components in producing hydrogen cars and fuel tanks.
Korea is also a major producer of automobiles. We also are trying to break into the hydrogen market, power market. The popular opinion is that the next industries that Japan will hit if they do decide to expand the restriction is Korean automobile market because they act as competitors to Japanese automakers.
Japan's economic pressure will also disrupt the global value chain, slowing the global economy, especially China's.
China makes finished products with Korean semiconductors. If China, which is considered the #1 global manufacturer, fails to produce advanced electronic goods, global supply will dramatically decrease. That is also bad news for consumers across the globe.
The 1973 oil crisis was another political dispute which turned into a full-scale economic retaliation, and it weighed heavily on global economic growth, which fell from 7% to around 2% in 1973. Experts do say, however, that Tokyo's export curbs will have more of a long-term economic effect and not likely to result in an acute crisis in the short run. This, especially as South Korean firms are exploring all possible means to cushion itself from the impact of Japan's possible expansion of export restrictions. However, industry watchers are voicing their concerns that if Tokyo dials up the economic pressure, the impact might be felt earlier in the second or third quarter of the next year. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
It's time now for an in-depth look at the markets on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will be pleased on Sunday to have increased his party's majority in the upper house of the Japanese legislature. What does this mean for the trade restrictions on Korea? Is there any chance they'll be withdrawn, or with significant public opposition to them, do you think any of that will be reflected in policy?
Japanese Prime Minister Abe, who has pledged to take retaliatory measures against South Korea through export restriction, is expected to maintain his political stance on South Korea after the upper house election. After the victory in the national election was confirmed, Abe reiterated his political position over South Korea that it is not trade retaliation but trade restriction related to the national security issues in terms of strengthening export regulations. The reasons for Abe's prolonged export restrictions on Korea are quite clear. Prime Minister Abe appears to have his top political priority on Japan's amendment of the peace constitution, and economic disputes with South Korea could give him good reasons for the amendment of the peace constitution. Therefore, Abe's pressure on South Korea will not be weaker after the election and is likely to have negative impacts on the whitelist revision.
Got it. Well, we ended last week with stocks on Wall Street down significantly. It seems there's not as much hope for a Fed rate cut bigger than 0.25%. Korean stocks also starting off the week fairly subdued. What's the story today?
In Wall Street, stocks ended lower Friday and posted weekly losses as traders assessed a slew of corporate earnings report and remarks from a top Federal Reserve official. Global equity markets had risen briefly towards the end of last week after dovish comments by New York Fed President John Williams boosted the prospects of the central bank lowering rates by 50 basis points. However, the stock markets gave back those gains after the New York Fed walked back Williams' comments by saying his speech was not about potential policy action at the upcoming Fed meeting. Asian stocks eased on Monday as investors reduced expectations of an aggressive interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve. Expectations for a 50 basis points cut were scaled back further after the Wall Street Journal reported the Fed was likely to cut rates by 25 basis points. South Korea's Kospi shed 0.05%, while Japan's Nikkei fell 0.23%.
Well, now on this Monday, we're looking ahead. The Bank of Korea will be releasing the growth figures for the second quarter this week. Also, Korea will be bringing up the issue of Japan's trade curbs to the WTO. What should we be watching this week?
The Bank of Korea will release economic growth rate for Q2 year 2019 on this coming Thursday. The BOK has lowered its forecast for growth rate this year from 2.5% to 2.2% in last week. The growth rate in the second quarter will not be as high as expected. The market consensus for the second quarter growth rate is about 1.0%. Many of Kospi companies will release their earnings report of Q2 year 2019 on in this week. Companies releasing earnings report include Hyundai Motor Company, Uri Financial Group, J Worldwide, POSCO, Kia Motors, Samsung Biologics, LG Display, LG Chemical, Hyundai Mobis, SK Hynix, and Naver. ECB monetary policy meeting will be held on this coming Thursday. Investors are watching if ECB will take another favorable monetary policy measure for the market in line with global monetary policy easing. In the meantime, the ECB has talked about additional stimulus measures several times.
All right, Dr. Huang, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, data from the Korea Customs Service suggests the country's exports are on course to fall for an 8th month in a row. In the first 20 days of July, they were down 14%. The decline was led by semiconductors, which account for almost a fifth of South Korea's total exports. They were down 30%, and petrochemical goods were down more than 15%. Overall exports to China and the EU fell by double digits, and exports to the U.S. dropped 5%. In July, semiconductors are on course for an even bigger on-year decline than in June, when chip exports fell 25%. The fourth industrial revolution is expected to sweep away older technologies and create fantastic new ones. Hopefully also lots of well-paying jobs for the brightest of the bright. South Korea is introducing unique fields of study to help high school students develop valuable skills and creative minds that'll enable them to adapt to the kind of jobs that might be needed in the future. Oh Soo-young has this report.
The students here are training to work in jobs that don't yet exist. Enrolled in a technical high school, they're focusing on biohealth and chemistry, a core sector that the country plans to grow into a $50 billion export market by 2030.
Since I was little, I've wondered why injections and medical treatments have to be painful and inconvenient, so I became determined to develop new medical solutions of my own.
Korean society has long valued academic prestige and conventional career paths. However, with the rapidly changing job market and the technological disturbances brought about by the Fourth Industrial Revolution, alternative measures are needed to nurture valuable skill sets and innovative mindsets. Students here can earn a certificate in chemical analysis so that they can start work right away instead of going to university.
Our students could work in a wide range of new jobs and roles in biochemistry, from quality control, tackling fine dust or harmful chemicals, as well as the development of new medicine and health solutions.
Another promising sector for future workers is artificial intelligence.
Basically, going forward, a lot of the companies require people with skills like AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, and cloud. And what P-Tech offers is exactly that education. Plus, what we also offer is for the students to learn about leadership skills, collaboration, problem-solving skills.
This technical school in northern Seoul earlier this year became Korea's first AI vocational school based on IBM's P-Tech curriculum. The students undergo 3 years of high school and 2 years of college education in software development, machine learning, and other AI-related disciplines.
I'd like to work as an educator in AI. The courses are challenging, but I will try hard.
By the time our 52 students graduate, they will have undergone more practical training than they would have at a 4-year university, thus well prepared for the new fields and jobs related to AI that don't even exist today.
The Education Ministry says it aims to boost the number of departments in specialized schools to 500 by 2022 to offer more specific training and breakthrough technologies like drones, fintech, biohealth, and driverless cars. But we need a culture change. Observers say children and, more crucially, their parents must better understand the labour market's demand for practical and applicable skill sets rather than the formality of a four-year college degree. 오수영, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.